Hi, friends. Welcome back to a fresh new 2026 season of RPC Money Talks, where we get real about money and what it takes to run the kind of business and life that lights you up while also learning about the stuff no one warned us about when we decided to start a business. I'm Katie Mast, your host and the director of community here at Rock Paper Coin. And if we haven't met before, we're a payment platform built for small business owners just like you that's designed to make invoicing, contracts, and payments easy and affordable, which is exactly the kind of energy we all need in our lives. So listen, we are starting 2026 loud, smart, and protected because if you are seeing more refund requests, disputes, or sketchy payment behavior lately, yes, you are, and you are not alone. Today, we are breaking down what's actually happening with chargebacks, what new verbiage and updates you must have in your contracts, and the alarming new client refund trend that's been spreading on social media. We have so much to get to today, so please help me welcome my two special guests for the day, your amazing legal ally, Kunbi from Legally Set, and Elizabeth, co-founder of RPC to Money Talks. Friends, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
Hello.
having us. Well,
Ah,
thank
all
you.
right.
Thank you both for having me. I'm so grateful.
Yes, we're so glad that you're here. In fact, Kunbi, can you start us off with a little intro? And then Elizabeth, would you also?
Okay, sounds good. My name is Kunbi. I love the legal Katie, so I think I'm gonna that. So it's now mine. Just let's go with that. But I am an attorney based in New York. I am also the founder of Legally Set, um, contract templates and education platform, helping people make sense of what's going on, even with their contracts. I have been practicing for 15 years now, and I have the immense pleasure of servicing a good chunk of event professionals and hospitality professionals around the country. So, yeah, it's been a fun year legally.
Love.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Smith. I'm one of the co-founders at Rock Paper Coin. My background was a wedding planner for almost now, I think, 19 years. So, been in the industry for a while and started Rock Paper Coin as a need-based solution for our own planning company. And I cannot tell you how excited I am about this topic. I kind of sit on the side of when things go wrong for some of our members on Rock Paper Coin and a dispute, chargeback, fraudulent payment happens. And so this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart.
Yes, I also was talking to Nora, our other co-founder of Rock Paper Coin yesterday, and Elizabeth, fun fact, this is our first webinar together. Yeah, and so I was like, wait, I love this. So hi 2026, doing all new things. We need to do this more often. Okay, well, thank you so much for both of your intros. And Kumi, before we get started, I need to ask you this question because we ask this to every guest because I think it's important and I love how different everyone's answers are. So tell me why this conversation is so important to have with us today.
Oh goodness. So this conversation is timely and very important, especially given the fact that the year has just started and you have the opportunity to set the tone, how you want to be regarded when it comes to your contracts or when it comes to your client relationships this year. It's particularly important because as someone who gets to see, similar to rock paper coin, to see the back end of certain things and usually the not so sexy part of it where it's like disputes and things like that, I know firsthand that this was a particular problem in 2025 and 2024. So it's better to get it fixed now or at least be prepared so it's not something that's catching you off guard.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And that's why I love asking that question. So before we dive in, I actually want to ask those of you that are joining us live, if you will throw a comment or an emoji in the chat, if you have ever had a dispute or a chargeback hit your account out of nowhere. So drop in the chat. A client be confused or hesitant about your cancellation policy that was very clearly outlined from the start. A final payment that felt off or had a weird vibe or energy around it. A client ask for a refund after the event. If any of that has ever happened to you before, please feel free to drop a comment in the chat or, yep, there we go. Yes. Okay. So first, let's normalize something here. Okay. Everyone has had a negative client situation or a scope issue. And if you haven't yet, you will because you're human. What's not normal is the major shift that we are seeing, which is people are quicker to act on disputes. People are using more refund pressure or threats. More clients are treating pros like Amazon returns. They're expecting instant gratification and money in their account today. And now people are openly bragging online about how much money they got back from wedding vendors after the event already happened. This is wild behavior. And today isn't about building fear or paranoia. It's about being informed, protected, and harder to mess with moving forward. So, Kunbi, you have a front row seat right now witnessing what's actually happening when disputes, chargebacks, post-event refunds occur as an attorney working with numerous small business owners. So what's actually happening right now? And can you break down what you're seeing real pros having to go through?
Okay, so yes, I like to refer to it as the wild, wild west because there's just so many things happening at the same time. There is a lot of there's a lot of post-event or post-completion conflict, a lot of like chargebacks. That one, if you haven't had a chargeback, just thank God for that because it literally can be the most like, demoralizing thing and destabilizing for a lot of pros as well when it happens. And because a lot of credit card companies will err on the side of the on consumer because of a lot of consumer protection laws, a lot of times it gets really hard for you to like when it comes your way, you're just shook and then trying to figure out how to navigate it with the evidence and things like that. It's just so much stress that comes with that. So what I've seen for sure is definitely a lot of chargeback disputes. I've seen a lot of people come to me saying that, oh, I offered this service, whether a planner, whether it's a graphic designer, or even, I'm not even joking, I have seen a situation with a wedding dress designer where the client actually wore the dress and then charged back. So there's nothing is off the board, basically, is what I mean. I've seen it with coaches where you've already given them access to everything and then they hit you with the chargeback. But now they have all the access and all the information from whatever digital project, whatever it is. And then you're stuck with no payment and then also some kind of penalty or the other. I know some people that like a planner client of mine, for instance, got a chargeback and Stripe froze the account, like completely froze the account and then did not even allow her access, like to withdraw any money from there or take anything on. So that's one. I've seen a lot of buyer's remorse. A lot of buyer's remorse is what I've labeled it for when like a couple comes back from their honeymoon or they've had the wedding of their dreams and they now start nitpicking because they are looking to see how they can make money back because maybe they felt like they overspent, maybe they felt like this. Those are happening as well. I've seen situations, and I'm not joking, where TikTok trends or Reddit trends are telling you to criticize each image of a photographer's final product so you can then reject the delivery and say that you want your money back. There are so many things going on in terms of like dissatisfaction because we can get into that further, but like there is definitely a lot of pushback and quite a bit more disputes and conflicts happening.
Yeah. So from a lawyer's perspective, who is really good at reading people, what do you think is driving this trend or this charge back refund culture right now? Is it a generational thing? Is it purely money? Like, what do you think is driving this?
It's say that for one, you know how I don't know if you guys are familiar with the trend where like when you see something like that's not usually how it is, you say it's a recession indicator. Well, this is one of those things where generally too, I would call it like there's obviously a little bit more like economic anxiety in general the last couple of years. Also, because of I will blame so many things on COVID because basically that complete elimination of events and then the return surge of events has made this market in itself one that there are just so many events and so many things happening. However, the underlying remnant of the whole COVID period, people now second guess where they spend. So they will second guess, especially when it comes to events, because A, they probably lost money due to the fact that they were not able to have whatever event it was that they planned, but also because everybody's now, like, erring, both vendors and couples or customers are now erring on the side of protecting their money first, which, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing depending on where the pendulum swings, but it's causing a lot of economic anxiety. I bet you there's somebody in this audience that knows, for instance, another trend that's happening is that booking windows are getting shorter. Decision making is getting shorter. So, like, for instance, you more before, where you could book out like maybe years in advance, or maybe like a year in advance or 2 years, you find that some people aren't even making decisions until like the 3-month window. All of those things play a part in that process. And then, of course, there's social media, because now social media is telling you, especially if you see another bride or another groom or another celebrant on online saying, guess what I did? I got this money back. Or look at how beautiful my wedding is. I only paid $1,000. So like, either way, there's a comparison aspect, or like, this should be me, or why wasn't this me? Yeah. That's now basically dictating or informing how these relationships are. There's just, everybody's a little, at least one level up of being antsier about how and who they spend their money with. And I think that's reflecting in how this is going.
Yeah, I do think too that now as a society, we have a need for this instant fix. There's just so much misinformation that's coming at people from every direction, because people don't go to qualified people for advice anymore. They go to Reddit, they go to Facebook groups, they go to strangers, right?
And they go to ChatGPT.
Totally. And they may not have relevant experience or not. And then they take these people's advice and they say, just dispute it. Right? And they don't really understand what that means. You don't actually understand. So I have to imagine that it really, really starts here with your contracts and where they're falling short in protecting you. And I know that you see and you review so many contracts, and I know a lot of them probably scare you because of what they don't have and what is missing. So what do people need to have right now in their contracts for 2026 to protect themselves from this?
Okay, so to protect from, there's so many things that people need to have in their contracts, just generally, because the world so the world is evolving really fast. But I think definitely, depending on what your service is, making it clear, like, for instance, what your non-refundable retainer is under any circumstance. This is the money that I'm taking so that I can forego other work to be able to attend you, or to be able to focus and plan for your event. This is also what is this payment is non-refundable also because, I mean, it's removing that date and the availability of that date, but also it's going different administrative things might happen during that process to prepare for your event. But so definitely making it clear what the non-refundable retainer is for that, for the agreement, making it clear what you are offering, like making it clear from the beginning what it is that you are offering in terms of services. And this is even before we even get into the cancellation language. I feel like a lot of people are glossing over what categorizes what qualifies as a cancellation, and they're not making it clear when and how a person can cancel, and what the not consequences, but what the natural effect of that is going to be based on your relationship. Making it understanding that cancellation and termination are possibly two different things. Because one, the ability for you to terminate from my services, let me know what that is under. Will it be treated as a cancellation under any circumstance? And in under what circumstances can I terminate and keep the amount of money that has been paid? Because that's another thing. I feel like one thing that has come out of this chargeback situation is also being able to see it's easier for you to defend a termination or a chargeback, basically, if you can establish that that money was earned. If you can establish that that money per the terms of your contract are clear. It's harder if your contract is quiet on what cancellations look like, or what termination or what breach looks like, and the person is then claiming that you breached something and that you didn't earn the money, and that's why they are asking for their money back. So making sure that your contract is actually clear on that is very important. Making sure that your contract is clear on force majeure. What constitutes force majeure? Those are the ways that, like, you know, the more detailed and the more clear your contract is, the better for you. One thing that I've been doing since this, I already caught onto this problem for like 2 years now. So one thing I've been telling my clients is, if you are worried about chargebacks, a chargeback clause is more than relevant. A chargeback clause is what helped and made it easier for my client. The event, like the situation I mentioned about the wedding dress, to be clear and say you filed a fraudulent chargeback, given that this you had received it wasn't fraud, you had received the product and you wore the product for your wedding, and here are images that show that you wore this at your wedding.
Yeah.
It's just easier to be able to say that, because even if this escalated to court, you have something, you have documented proof that this is how the process went, and they knew what they were signing before they entered into it. It's like, people will always just try and push. So you having something to protect you is very, very important.
I think one thing that we hear people say at Rock Paper Coin too is, but my contract says no refunds, which obviously to us, right? That sounds really clear. We know boundaries, but that's not enough. And so I think that what you're really hitting on here is that when you see vague versus specific language in a contract, it is so incredibly important. And when your contract is very vague, when it simply implies, when you have to read between the lines and say, I think that's what they meant, or this could be, it's actually hurting you. It's hurting you more. Right.
100%. No refunds says nothing to me. No refunds is just the starting. Because no refunds, why? No refunds in what scenario? Like, a judge will tear it apart if it actually went all the way there, because, okay, no refunds. You can't just say no refunds. It needs to be clear as to what the process is and in what scenario. I think it's really important, because otherwise, one thing, but you might need to actually justify that, or at least explain in what scenario. And why I say that is because no refund sounds different for someone who says no refunds after a service has been performed, and no refunds when nothing has been performed. Do you know what I mean? So it's very important that your contract is clear about that.
Okay. Elizabeth.
I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions about the contract verbiage, and being specific is absolutely must have. And when it comes to kind of chargeback disputes, or even going to like a small claims court, I would love if you could also just like touch on, basically documenting the process as well. What we see sometimes is when a chargeback happens, we reach out to the company, but they don't have communication from this customer. They don't have images, or they don't have, and it just makes it so much harder. So the contract is definitely the most important piece, but you also have to be able to collect things to support the contract then in a lot of these circumstances.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. God bless you for that statement, because never has something been truer. Let me tell you, first of all, a contract is one line of defense. If you do not have substantial documentation, you are not playing business at all. You are doing a hobby. And I have to say that honestly, because one thing that ends up happening is that you might even have a contract, but when the judge starts telling you to bring out all the things, or if they ask for additional documentation or even correspondence, then you're left missing, basically. And that's what she's just described. I've had situations where it's like, okay, where is the document trail? Bring the document trail. Let's see what's missing. Because let me tell you something, a contract is it's for me, it's the first line of defense. I prefer that you always have that, because it sets the tone for your client relationship, period. It also is something you can go back to, and it governs how your business is going to run. However, changes happen, discussions happen outside of that contract, numbers are discussed, preferences are discussed, work is discussed. And if all of those things are absent, I have had so many situations where actual documentation would have saved a client so much money. And I'm not talking small money, I'm talking even as much as $5,000, $10,000, even honestly, even $100. I could use $100 right now. So whatever it is, you're losing money by not keeping that documentation. For instance, like, okay, a client has said that they will you've sent them, like, you're a wedding planner. Let me just throw that one out there. Like, you've given them a bunch of different scenarios, different vendor options, and send them this vendor or send them this vendor. Or you've communicated a conversation about the DJ list, music list, for instance, the set list. You've sent it to them, or they have approved it, or a written approval of this addition to the budget was made. If you do not have any of those documented, every single one of those scenarios, I promise you, are actual scenarios that happened that have led to either a court case or a full conflict where the client was now asking for a refund. So if you do not have those documentation, if you're not taking audio notes on Instagram or Voxer, like if you're not reiterating these conversations in writing, I'm saying, even if you have this on a phone call, even if they send you an audio note or an Instagram DM, reiterate that conversation in writing. It will save you so much stress, because that is all the hills and valleys outside of the contract that you also have to keep in mind. So
Amazing.
Thank you.
Is there a point at which you think if the scope of the original contract has changed enough, it warrants a addendum? Is there any?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
100%.
At what point or?
Okay, I won't say at every point, right? Because there's some things that are surface and that you like, it's in writing is sufficient enough. Any material change to the contract needs to be documented with an amendment. I believe that 100%, because it needs to be added on, and it also changes certain things in the contract. So for instance, like even like changing guest count, a 10% change in guest count might not mean the same thing as a 50% change in guest count. It's great to materially change it. Anything that materially changes the design, anything that materially alters the scope of work in which you're doing, and it's not something that's generally considered as in the course of business or a general reasonable addition to your contract, needs to be documented, so that it's not something that you end up having a change in venue, a change in date. Those without a doubt need to be documented with an amendment. A change in design, like I said, an addition of an extra piece where it's going to change how you do work or what the numbers look like for your work. It's best to have it in an amendment.
So, question, because this is often seen all over in places where they're not asking a legal attorney. How often should people be updating their contracts? Are we talking every event? Because sometimes you want to. Every quarter, every year? And do they need to pay an attorney every single time they make changes to their contract? What is your take on this?
So I might be a bit biased here and say, yes, you should pay an attorney every time you make changes to your contract. But the truth is, I think that your contract deserves a quarterly audit, a quarterly check-in, and see, like, based on what we saw in the last 3 months, how did it go? However, like Katie did say, some things will happen and you will go home. I don't know if anybody has seen Mean Girls, and you go back, when she was writing in the burn book, and you will sit down and be like, this raggedy.
Listen,
this
we have
never
all
happen again.
sat down and said on the way home at 2 o'clock in the morning, I do not ever want this to happen to me ever again.
Exactly. Because that's why I believe that no one contract is the same, because things will happen to you that you will realize, okay, I need to add this on. And so certain things, it might just be necessarily like, okay, you're changing what your minimum is, or you're changing what your cancellation window is, or you're changing maybe like including a particular interaction under the harassment clause, because that can never happen again. But like, there's some things that you might be able to do as surface edits. But I will always recommend that if there is anything significantly changing, or if you might not know what significant looks like. And let me tell you something. If you do not know what significant looks like in your contract, you should be speaking to an attorney, because then at least you'll be like, okay, can you just take a look at this and just make sure that I'm good? You want an attorney's touch, at least for me, at least once a year, just to see like, hey, don't want a repeat of last year, or maybe I do want a repeat of last year. Are we still good given the climate? But the reason why I always opt for something quarterly, and quarterly doesn't mean that you're like upheaving your entire contract. It just means, are we still good? A quarterly audit is great because things are changing fast. Like, I bet you people that did their contracts 2 years ago do not have AI related language inside their contract now. I bet you somebody that didn't have a situation with chargebacks until like maybe last December or during Black Friday is probably thinking now that, hey, I think I need to have that into my clause. Or somebody that's saying that, somebody's seeing, for instance, and this has nothing to do with chargebacks, so I have to mention it as well. But somebody is seeing that the client is uploading your design and all your papers and all of the things that you have provided them in your onboarding onto ChatGPT, and creating something else with them and acting like it's their own, or then presenting it to another service provider to work with. somebody that maybe hadn't experienced that before might not know that maybe they need an intellectual property clause inside their agreement and make it clear that this is prohibited actions. Do you know what I mean? So all of these things, there's a lot of stuff that happens, and the contract is a living, breathing document that needs to be updated and nurtured over time. So you figure out what that looks like for you. I'm not saying split it in between wedding planning season or design season, or, or the summer when like a lot of stuff is happening. Just, set that tone and keep it as part of one of the maintenance things that you have to do to make sure that your business keeps running successfully.
Yeah. We're going to move into some tech stuff in a minute, but before we do, I want to ask, do you think there's specific wording that deters people from even considering filing for a refund or a chargeback in the first place when they sign a contract with someone? Because I know when I get a contract, I'm reading it and some of it seems super, super scary. And so in this case, maybe that super scary verbiage wasn't there in the first place. And so somebody felt comfortable enough to be able to do it. Or maybe they just didn't care and that's the new status quo, right? So what do you think there?
I think it's a mix of both. Obviously, there's some really stubborn people in this world that'll be like, okay, even if I'm still going to fight it. But let me tell you something. Yeah. Scary is having a great comeback. And I'm so glad about that because it's something I've been saying for years. When I first started offering agreements and contracts for event professionals, I remember people saying, wow, your contract is really scary, or your contract is this. I'm like, it's scary because people are scary. Like, people will take advantage of what availability or whatever gap they feel like they can find. It's a natural part of being a human being. I have a toddler. Well, she's going to be 4 next week. And let me tell you something. You tell her, don't do this, she's going to do it. You space it out, and she's going to find whatever complicated way she's going to try and cause injury to herself. She's going to choose that. So I'm telling you that because humans aren't any different. Let's not deceive ourselves. A lot of times I see myself reflected in this little 3-year-old. And so it's the same way, and it's the same thing that governs how I do business. Like, yes, everything is rosy, it's beautiful, we are BFFs until something goes wrong, or until somebody needs a flexibility and they're going to look, and all of a sudden you're enemies. And it's unfortunate, but the truth is, like, your language is there to be the independent decider of that conversation without emotion, without anything. So if it's scary, then I think we just need that extra step during the client onboarding process, being like, I know this looks crazy, but I know it's not crazy, but I know this looks scary, but it's there to protect you and I. And it's there to protect us so that we have a seamless client relationship, and that way we can always go back to it if there's an issue. I can bet you that so many disputes, at least, I'm going to throw out a random stat, and I know rock, paper, coin is going to completely discredit me because I do not know stats, but I can bet you that at least 50% of client disputes are even eliminated before the client even sends the first email, because they've gone back into that contract that's signed by both parties and they see what your contract says about this thing and they know, she doesn't play that. I'm not even going to try.
I think to add on to that too, the contract, you have to have it for a dispute, first of all, but you also have to understand that disputes and chargebacks, these things are designed for consumer protection. And so you as the business, you almost have to prove yourself 2x compared to the customer. So you have to have these things. But ultimately what this is doing is giving you a legal documentation to take to small claims court if you are to lose that chargeback or that dispute. You have to have it. It's an absolute minimum for a chargeback to be able to show a contract. But the credit card companies are protecting the consumer. So you don't typically get a lot of protection as the business, which is why small claims court is there. And then you're able to present your side of the case. So it's important to understand also the different steps and where the contract is coming into play at the different steps of, a potential legal battle. Now, all of that we want to avoid this. So you as the business then get to decide, if this customer is filing a chargeback, have I done everything to try to resolve this without going to court? Have I tried to resolve this without them filing a dispute? And the credit card companies in a dispute process, they actually look on that very favorably to try to resolve something. But you as the business owner ultimately have that decision to make because you have the contract in place.
100%. I'm so glad that you said that, because like she said, it's already a necessary step in the process. But also, even when you get to court, the thing about it, once you even get to court, like she has mentioned, the court is going to look more favorably on the side of the party that was more vulnerable. So what that means is that if you are presenting them with your own agreement, and you have both signed the agreement. I keep saying that because a lot of times I find that people will show me an agreement that they haven't signed. Yes, you can argue that it's still a contract because if the client signed, sure, but why do you want any additional stress on like standing by your own contract? But like, you want to make sure that your contract is not vague, because the court is going to look at it like, you put your best foot forward by presenting them with your own agreement. So you knew what was in there before the client even did. The vulnerable party is the person that signed it. So they will err on the side of the person that's most vulnerable because they didn't know fully what your intention was with this clause or the other. So this is why you want to make sure that that is properly well documented from the beginning. So you do not have to fight. So the burden of proof does not shift, because it's already stacked up against you in certain parts. So you want to make sure that the contract is doing the heavy lift. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. Elizabeth, you are truly the crusader at RPC for all things transactions and fairness, let me tell you. And I know that our members are so thankful you have gone so far to learn about all of this to protect them, because this is not just like wake up and instincts. This is a lot of just getting into the weeds and learning about this. So I'm curious, have you found that how you accept payments like credit card versus ACH and the timing of retainers or final payments, does that impact dispute outcomes?
Yes, absolutely. So what is really nice when you have an online payment is that sites like Rock Paper Coin, and I'm sure many others, we track IP addresses. And so we are able to confidently show the credit card company, confidently provide the documentation for courts of that information, being like, this person logged in, they spent X amount of time looking at the document, and then they signed it, or they spent X amount of time looking at this document and then paid it. Here's the email address associated with it. Here's the IP address. We have so much data that we can then provide to show that this wasn't fraudulent or that they didn't know what they were signing. We really can pull a bunch of information to back up the business owner to show that this person legitimately paid that invoice. When you go into the, cash, and check world, yes, they can't necessarily file a dispute or have that money pulled back from a credit card company. So I understand that's the risk, but you also then lose all of that data that we're now tracking on your behalf of when the client logged in. So it really goes to a he said, she said, they said, and that is a situation we do not want to be in. We want data. We want, really clear information that we can provide not only to the credit card company, but a court as well if needed.
Yeah. What's one mistake that you see vendors making that unintentionally weakens their case when a chargeback or dispute happens?
I really feel, Kunbi, I'd love your weighing in on my thoughts of this. But it's really important when I see somebody with not a very strong contract hiding behind the contract with like full authority. And I mean this when somebody says that it says non-refundable. And it's like, I understand that the word non-refundable is in there, but did you try to resolve this? And the emails that we typically will get forwarded are just like, sorry, no refunds. Sorry, you signed my contract. And that kind of language, that kind of just like, I'm gonna, I delivered my service and this is all that I'm gonna do. I understand. I'm here to advocate on your behalf, but you also have to be advocating for your business throughout the entire process. So I need documentation. I need you to show me that you've been trying to make amends with this person or trying to be reasonable with this person. Just because we have one word in our contract does not mean that the courts are going to rule in our favor. I agree that it was very clear, but you have to have things that also back it up to show a full picture.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the double down defensive, like it does not get anyone anywhere.
And we're writing on behalf of customers. So when you submit information to us, when you send your contract in, when we pull all of this data, I am writing it on your behalf of saying they are a longstanding partner of Rock Paper Coin. They have good business practices. This is all the documentation that we've received. This is what we're seeing, on the back end of our system, all the data, of the time, the recordings that have happened. But if if you ultimately can't provide me with that information, then I really have a hard time going to bat. Like I just can't do my job in advocating for you as a business.
Yeah. So this is a great segue because I want to go ahead and shift into the tech side for a moment because a lot of this isn't just legal, it's also behavioral and, as you're saying, reactionary. So, of course, when our members reach out to us, they're understandably upset that a dispute has happened. Money is out of your account. That's a super scary feeling. We completely understand. And while, as you mentioned, we do sometimes hear about that aggressive demands that are sent, it's not always a client demanding a refund because something has gone wrong. Sometimes disputes are based on miscommunication, like mismatched names or cards, or clients not understanding what the charge was on their statement, or someone else is paying the bill and they didn't know that the payment was hitting or even what the payment amount was. And I know our team works really hard at educating our members in payment and invoice etiquette and how to be crystal clear about your payment process with your clients in the first place. So, kind of leaning a little more into that, what advice can you give to pros to better educate their clients on the payment process to avoid disputes being filed mistakenly in the first place?
Okay, one really quick thing. Kunbi, do you recommend that the person paying the invoice needs to also be signing a contract or being,
Great
part
question.
of the contract process?
So it depends. I would say that typically it depends on how much decision making authority and things like that you want that person to have on the other terms of the agreement. Otherwise, I would always recommend that the person sign what is called a third party payor addendum. It's basically a financial payment addendum that's added to the agreement, basically saying that this person is financially guaranteed or financially responsible for the agreement, and that way that's what that person is bound by, and that's the terms that you would be able to put in. Because if the person is paying and then the person tries to dispute it, you'd be like, hey, but you signed this and you are bound by the terms of the payment terms of this agreement. And the reason why I'm saying that is because sometimes, a lot of times, most of the vendors or service providers do not want that person to interfere with the process of planning or process of the actual event or scope of the agreement. So you keep those two while ensuring that somebody's on the hook financially.
Yeah. And
so that's my recommendation.
We've seen this happen a few times, and I would love, again, your kind of like legal eye on this. Some people, they don't know who the paying partner is going to be, and so they just forward the invoice to then whoever it is going to be once they've already signed the contract. And so with that, what I have seen a lot of businesses do is they just copy and paste the terms around the payment and put them as an invoice note saying like, by making this payment, you are agreeing to these terms. What is that? How do you view that?
Okay, so it depends. Again, sorry, I'm going to say it depends for a lot of things, but them putting that information, it's always a good idea to have financial terms at the bottom of an invoice or at the bottom of a payment link. It's always a great idea because it gets additional eyes on it. So if you can do that, why not do that? Because a lot of times you find some invoices are just blank and then somebody be like, oh, I don't know what I paid for. And then also it's a fail safe because in the event that, for instance, you haven't even sent an actual, like your agreement hasn't been signed both ways, you know that they've seen that financial terms and they're agreeing to that by making that payment. So I love that. I love that as an additional step. It doesn't eliminate or like supersede any terms of your actual agreement, but at least it does have that financial language there as well. So it's a good idea, especially for someone that is just paying independently, so they could be bound by those terms. Was that your question? Sorry.
I think to piggyback, yeah, totally. I think also just to like add on a little bit to that, what we saw at our planning company, and now we're seeing here too, is that when the contract and the invoice are not attached as like one single document, you get a lot of people misremembering the terms or people not paying attention to the contract. And so I just, again, will like really advocate whatever you are using for your software system. I hope it's RPC, but if it's not, that's okay too. Make sure that the contract and the invoice are attached. Don't send a contract and then say, can you make a payment by PayPal or by Zelle, or can you send in a check? Because when they sign the contract digitally and then an invoice is populated, they just reviewed the contract. It is all fresh. And now they know what they're paying. And when there's that gap and then they maybe pay 3, 5, 7 days later, you need to make sure that they are understanding the payment terms once again. And we see that happen a lot where they're like, oh, shoot, I forgot, or I need to re-invoice this person. And there's that, I don't know, they just forget about the terms. So having them attached and sending it as a bundle is very important.
I agree.
Love. Oh my gosh. I'm just like listening and absorbing all of this. I forgot where I was for a second. Okay. So when a dispute is reviewed, what do banks actually care more about? A signed contract or the cardholder's complaint? Or is there something else?
Well, from my experience in disputes, it is coming from the customer's bank. And it tells us everything that we need to know that they pull the funds from the business before they come to their decision. So if we have a lens that automatically this bank is trying to show that the customer is owed these funds, that is going to really then change the lens of what we're providing for the data of the disputes. The bank's entire process is to contact, as can be said, the more vulnerable party in the situation, which is typically the signer or the payee. And we could debate whether that's right or left. I would like to flip the entire table of disputes because it frustrates me so incredibly much that businesses can't be more protected in the process, but it's not how it's done today. So it is 100% their job to protect the consumer. Now, us as business owners, it's our job. It's our job to then protect ourselves and provide the documentation.
Yeah.
I'd be curious if you agree.
I 100% agree. It is. That's the truth. It might be stressful. It might be annoying, but like really, it's part of the process of being, the protective process of being a business owner, in my opinion. Like you just want to make sure that you have that well documented and carry that protection, because the burden will always, in one way or the other, and you have more to lose, to be honest. So the burden will always be on you. So why not, what's the word I'm looking for? Protect against that before it even happens.
And just to quantify disputes, I don't know how many you see, but at Rock Paper Coin, we see 1 in every 15,000 invoices has a dispute. So it's a very scary topic. And I think we're talking about things in general terms. So it can feel like these things are happening a lot. But this is rare. And I think what we talked about the first part of the conversation, like being more clear in terms and being more protected as a business really can help to, kind of like not have disputes come up. So this is not something that is like super common, and businesses typically only see, like 1 or 2 in many, many years of doing business, but it does happen. It's pretty rare. Kunbi, I would love what you see outside too.
I 100% agree. So the difference between you and I obviously is because you are processing like generally. Someone is only going to come to me when there is that issue. So it's not like, so that's the reason why I said, oh, I've seen it multiple times, but that's only because out of the 15, 20,000 people that are doing this in my area, maybe 1 or 2 people have had that issue. And then it's like, okay, that sounds like, it's not to scare anyone. It's just so that you have a full lens and a full understanding of what's happening around. So, maybe this is not the year that it's going to happen to you.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from both of you on this. Would you recommend people have a stash of dispute money or legal funds money now? Like we plan for taxes, we know to kind of stash that to the side, but do we now need to do this for chargebacks and disputes to cover the initial loss?
So I don't know if I would necessarily call it a legal fund, but I think that's a good way to. Sorry, Elizabeth, go ahead. But what I was going to say is basically that I do, things happen, and just like you have an emergency fund, you should have an emergency for if you are going to require the services of a professional, whether it's legal or tax, and or finance. It's just part of doing business. I remember during COVID, one of the things that really was coming up, and a lot of people, some of the people that were really saved during that period with the cancellation refund requests for force majeure were people that had escrow accounts. So people that weren't spending money before they were used, or holding on to amounts just so that it wasn't something that was, it wasn't something that had to come out of pocket. But then there's other ways, people having business continuity insurance in the event that they're unable to do something. However, all of those things are all various parts of one puzzle, and having funds like an emergency fund or like a cost of doing business fund that's not necessarily for the day to day is really important. So it's not something that's going to have to come out of pocket.
Yeah.
Yep. And one of the things that we see, so if there are no funds available to draw back a dispute, we cannot counter a dispute. And so it is very hard if we get kind of like frozen out of the process. And I understand I'm going to advocate, I'm going to try to get that money back for you. But sometimes like our hands are tied and it's really important that we can still follow in the process, which means that yes, you might have to transfer money from an account into your normal checking account, but not having some sort of emergency fund to deal with these one-off situations is just horrible, because this can become 10 times more expensive if you are not able to follow the process. And that's really what we want to avoid. We go through the dispute process. If it's an unfavorable outcome, there are small claims court, you have a good contract, you can go and recover those funds, but it's going to take a little bit of money to make sure that we follow that full process. And that's really where you want to make sure that you have something available to help yourself out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Elizabeth, I have to gush for a second about our dispute process and why we do what we do for our members, because we really do something a lot of other CRMs don't. And people really appreciate the extra time and care that we give. So we've kind of alluded to this a little bit. I wanted to give this the attention that it deserves. So typically when you get a dispute, the money leaves your account and you need to figure out how to get proof to the bank and defend your case to get the money back. We have heard that most CRMs don't help or provide much information, or as we've even heard from other pros, sometimes they don't even respond. So I want to take a minute and just highlight what we do at RPC for our members when they do have a dispute come in, and more importantly, why we do it the way that we do.
So, as I mentioned, I feel very strongly about the dispute process because it is a very one-sided process right now. And so for us as a platform, we have a lot more leverage than, say, a single business that is just, processing their payment on Stripe or PayPal or Square, whatever. So we have all of these payments, which means like our platform isn't going to get shut down over one dispute. Our, platform has more leverage with the Stripe team to talk about scenarios and get their advice. But for us, and what I saw is that the very first dispute that came in, I was blown away by like how much evidence we had to supply and how little evidence the consumer had to supply. They basically can just say, I'm upset and I didn't get what I wanted and I want my money back. They don't have to provide the contract. They don't have to provide anything. So automatically I was like, oh gosh, okay, well, we have to then provide 10x because we really have to prove they're already assuming that we're guilty in this process and that they're already going to take the money back. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to own this process so that I could then go into the Stripe team and talk with them. I can go into the business and talk with them to really understand that and then write a letter on their behalf. So not only are you providing documentation and all of the data that we can provide on the back end of RPC, but I also write a personal letter for every single dispute from the position of the CEO at Rock Paper Coin.
Yeah, that's incredible. And
That's
I know
incredible.
our members love to just, it's a scary moment, and to just feel like you truly have a brand and a business behind you that's got your back during a moment that feels very vulnerable. Right? It's very violating to just feel like you did something and you did your best and you showed up and somebody can just take that away from you. So I just wanted to give that a moment, the moment that it deserves, because I'm really proud that we do that. And I know that our members are very, very thankful for it. Okay, so my friends, we have arrived at the part of today's talk where we are going to chat about that alarming new trend that we talked about at the very beginning of this, and how people are sharing on social media how much money they got back from their vendors after their event. So first, I just want to say, listen, this is not advocacy. These are not clients that are sharing their honest feedback to help others. This is not a public review of a vendor gone rogue who's tarnishing the industry and deserves to be stopped. This is a strategized financial harm to small businesses everywhere. And here's the hard truth. If your contract layout, your invoicing wording, and your payment practices aren't airtight, you are a very easy target right now. And so I hope that that is what you are leaving today with that. Kunbi, I know that you definitely started your very strong feelings in the beginning of this talk about this situation. And we actually talked about this when we were at a conference together in Vermont a few months ago. And it prompted this chat today because we were both so fired up about this happening. So, I want to thank you, first of all, for being able to chat about this. Yeah. And second, I really want everyone to go into 2026 protected and ready for anything that comes knocking at your digital front door. So I want you to go ahead and make a plan and get this down. So Kumbi, tell me if I missed anything here, but we want everyone here to have some homework and they're going to review their contracts and they're going to update them with you, hopefully. They're going to connect. Yes, exactly. You're going to connect with Kumbi and you're going to get all up to speed for 2026 because this conversation, again, was not to have fear, it's to get you protected. You're going to make sure that you have clear language. There's nothing vague on your website, on your proposals, on your invoices, on your contracts, on your socials, and all of your client documents. Your invoice needs to match the offer, the verbiage, and the language of your contract. You need clear payment outlines, which is the retainers, the non-refundable fees, the late fees, due dates. You're going to document and save everything, emails, approvals, delivery dates, payments, change requests. And you're going to honor your gut checks and you're going to invest in systems that log everything. Because at the end of the day, doing all of this is still not going to stop a dispute from coming, but it's going to help you win. And that's the goal. Did I miss anything, ladies?
One of the ones that Katie and I had spoken about, and might not necessarily apply here, but should, is screenshots. So yes, like you definitely have the legal documentation, but if you did bypass your gut and then ended up with a red flag client who has gone through the whole process complaining of the other. Also, like when you on social media, if they're posting the event, for instance, if you're a photographer or planner and talking about how amazing you are, take a screenshot of that and just save it and put it on record. Because like I said, buyer's remorse tends to happen. And the situation that happened was basically like my client went back to the Instagram account to see the comments that was so nice and so cheery, and they had deleted it or they had edited it, so she couldn't save it. So just save those two from time to time. We're not saying prepare for war, but because I don't want it to be, and nobody's trying to be a Debbie Downer, but there's always that one that bypasses the gut check and then it's just chaos, maybe from the beginning or at some point during the process. So just make sure that receipts. That's what I want you to share with. Keep receipts.
I saw two questions sneak in at some point, and I just wanted to loop back around to how many signers on a contract do you recommend? Like,
typically,
is it
the people
do you
that
recommend? Okay.
So recommendation, I 100% depending on what the person does, right? So if it's a wedding, then both parties, both people getting married need to be signers, because there has been a situation where one left the other before the wedding, and the person who signed was the person that was jilted. It's never fun to have to go after your money on the person that had nothing to do with the situation that has happened. So making sure that those two are there. I say there can never be too many people signing a contract, but the truth is, if you do not want chaos, you want to make sure that you're signing, but that at least the two people that are involved are signing, or two parties. If it's an entity to entity situation, then you would have whoever the representative. I am sorry. I
great.
completely forgot it was half day today. But so you would want to make sure that whoever the representative or the legal or authorized representative of that company is signing that document as well.
Yeah. And just one stat. So Rock Paper Coin in 2025, we had 50% of all contracts were countersigned by the business. And by the end of 2025, it's 58. So it's growing, but we need that number at 100%.
Please.
We make it very easy to add in your signature on any contract. You don't have to necessarily go in and overhaul your contracts to have a countersigning. You can countersign contracts that are already in flight too. Just go in and add your signature to it. And it's really important because then your customers get a fully executed contract as well.
I agree.
Love. Okay, so before we jump into Q&A, we've got a few moments here. We got some good questions. I did want to just say for everyone listening, I am so thankful for these ladies giving us their time today. So as a thank you, I'd love everyone to think of your biggest aha moment from today. I want you to head to Instagram and I want you to take a picture of your screen right now, tag Rock, Paper, Coin and Legally Set, and please share your moment with these two amazing ladies because they would love to know what resonated with you today. Sarah is going to go ahead and drop those Instagram links right into the chat again so we're easy to find. And while you're doing that, let's just jump into these couple Q&A questions that we can answer. So this first one is, I am constantly chasing after payments, no matter what my contract says. My clients are not afraid of consequences, and I can't afford an attorney to make clients pay after. What do I do?
You take
Why are
payment before the event.
Okay, so thank you for the more appropriate response. So why are you chasing after people? Like, sorry, that was one thing that actually came to my mind when we were talking. Like, we were talking about payments and how it's done. Your final payment should be collected before the event date.
Right.
Yes. And you should not be showing up to an event if you don't have final payment. Like
And your
that,
contract
you
should be
use
clear about that.
all leverage if you execute an event without final payment. Now, sometimes there's things that come up on the day of, and then you can invoice them for small things, but you should have 99.9% of all of your money before that event. And then I would also be curious to know, like, are you chasing down payments because you're not invoicing on a software system that's sending out automated reminders? And when you say there's no, like, they're not afraid of consequences, like the consequence is you not showing up at the event. So that's the consequence. And I think once maybe you shift your payment methods or you do online invoicing that sends out automated reminders, like chasing invoices, that was like so 2000 and like whatever, 10, 12. Like, you don't need to be doing that anymore.
You should not. It's just going to bring you stress that you do not even need to be through.
And please don't even start work before you get that first payment. Right. Like, you don't owe anyone anything until they pay you to start working.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. If you do end up having to pay a dispute for whatever reason, what are some best practices for your cash flow in that case? Kunbi, I know you talked about a couple of options. Was it insurance? Was there a specific insurance that covered?
Oh, well, so it depends. You have to speak to your insurance provider. I'm not half of the time I don't know what I'm saying when it comes to insurance, let me not lie. But business continuity is one. You also want to make sure speak to your business. If you have a business insurance broker, speak to them about what it would be if for some reason you were not able to, you had to suspend services for any reason or something like that. One thing I will say is that your contract is also there to protect you in situations like that with the language, with something called an emergency substitution clause, because an emergency substitution clause will allow you the opportunity to have somebody else substituted in to carry out that services. And if you are working as an entity, that is even something where that person can just work, like that person can be a contractor for your service and provide that service so that you do not have to give money back. Anything that, like, the whole point is for it to work around so that you are able to get somebody else to step in, but you do not have to give any money back. So that's one. Escrow accounts are always a good idea depending on what service you're providing. For instance, if you're someone who is providing a service that maybe you're not earning the money immediately as the time goes, or maybe not until XYZ, never a bad idea. So you're not spending all the money. Like I said, okay, so the insurance one. But for me, everything really just enters into that space where you want to make sure that your agreement is basically allowing you to keep money, move money, at the most move money to a next date instead of having to refund money. Some people, for cash flow purposes, will also do something called like they'll do monthly payments. And I know that a lot of percentage planners are moving into this space, especially since the budget changes pretty frequently, and also because clients all of a sudden have amnesia when it comes to percentage pricing when it gets closer to the date and everything is coming. The chickens are coming home to roost. So it's always a good idea to collect that payment, or like collect those payments like on a monthly, like if it's monthly, especially if there's a long engagement, spread out those payments and make sure that it's clear that each monthly payment is non-refundable upon payment as liquidated damages, because it's money that you're earning as you go. I think that's a good idea to also maintain cash flow. We've moved way past the whole 50 now and 50 later. You can do more. You can add like two more in there and break it down into every quarter. There's more ways for you to control how payments come in. And then the more they come in, the easier it is for you to even establish the non-refundable nature because they're opting into those frequently.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you. This one's great. Are contract templates really safe? When you buy a paid template package and input all of your info, are you really as covered as someone who hired an attorney to build one from scratch?
Huh? Okay, so I want to answer this in the best way that doesn't affect, I'm joking. Like, because as someone that sells contract templates, I will say they are safe, but so here, they are safe. Obviously, in that a contract has been drafted by an attorney and has been considered with the general nature of your business in mind. They've made it industry specific. So, as a starting point, they are always, that's a great starting point. However, like I mentioned before, contracts are very personal because there are certain things that might not necessarily be the way you handle things. Yes, you want to change it, but I always think it's a great idea for you to also have an attorney sign off on it, especially an attorney in your jurisdiction, an attorney in your industry, just because you want to make sure that it's safe for you. So yes, they are safe in that. Knock on wood, nobody's come back and said that this is affecting them in this way, but they also understand that it's a limited nature and that it has been drafted independent of knowing your specific issues, but more the general issues in your industry or in your industry category. So you shouldn't be rolling with a contract template blindly for the rest of your business. You definitely should still be including a lawyer in that, because guess what? If an attorney has custom drafted a contract for a person, they have considered every single possibility as it pertains to that person. They have considered the person's wants, they have considered the person's issues, they have taken an audit of that person's business and know exactly how they will uniquely be protected. So
Yeah.
so basically what we just even spoke about, like even the cash flow situation, if this person knows that this client is only taking 5 clients in a year and knows that the cash flow is very important to them to maintain the nature of that, they know that they are going to have to change how those payments show up. They also know that, okay, if they know that their client is, for instance, a stationer who's ordering like a lot of like maybe paper goods from like maybe an outside country, and that, for instance, this last year, tariffs came in the middle of the year and like kind of disrupted everything. That might not be addressed in a template, but the lawyer knows that they have to make sure that those things are changed because they need to now have an adjusted cost of goods clause, basically stating that the cost of raw materials might change if it's significantly impacted by a government action or tariff, that the client will be responsible for those payments. Those are not things that a template is going to immediately know. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. I know we're over on time, so I really, really
thank you so much.
appreciate your time. I thank you so much, both of you, for being here today, for lending your expertise and your experience, and for just teaching us so much about a topic that's so important and very, very needed. I want to thank everyone for listening, and don't forget to tag us on social media today, sharing what you learned so that you can help educate other pros around you, because together we are building a stronger and safer industry for everyone. Please be sure to join us next month for a brand new session of RPC Money Talks, which is all about affiliate programs and making a residual income because your clients are already buying the products. You just aren't getting paid for sending them the links. So let's change that in 2026 and get you paid. Thanks again, ladies. So excited you were here. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon and have a great day.
Bye.